All right, I think we'll get started. It's 11:01. Again, this is Brandon Van Cleve, Vice President here at Pine Cove Consulting. Our topic today is managed 24/7 threat hunting and remediation, and we're calling in our partner that's running this webinar for us. We're calling MTR, and we're super lucky and I think we're honored to have Eric and Matt with Sophos, and it's just pretty incredible. With the partnership that we have and the commitment that Sophos has to us to have, Eric and Matt, who we have, we basically have the product marketing manager and the director of this product speaking to you guys today. So this is coming right from the brains of the operation and really the people behind, bringing this to market. So I'm really appreciative to Eric and Matt and Sophos for, committing and partnering with us to bring such a great resource. So yeah, maybe you can go ahead and go to the next slide there, Eric. So, and as we get into this, I highly encourage you. So, I'm going to give this quick intro, and then I'm going to kick it over to the Sophos team to dive into it. But as all of our webinars go, those of you that are familiar with it, we love to have dialogue with you. So if you have questions throughout, drop those in the questions tab on your little dashboard there, and we'll make sure we get those asked. And as Eric and Matt and I were talking beforehand, we love the engagement. So any question you have, you don't get an opportunity like this very often to have it right from the creators of this and the people driving this. So anything that comes up that you want to make sure we answer, drop it in there, and I'll make sure to integrate it to make sure we get an answer for it. And if there's any follow-up after, obviously we'll make sure we reach out. This is recorded, so if you want to share this with someone else or you want to review it at any time, we should have that out within 24 hours, and we'll make sure that's emailed out to everybody. So yeah, just kind of getting into it. Again, I think we have a lot of current customers on. We have some people that we haven't worked with. That's a great mix. So who the heck is Pine Cove? So Pine Cove is based in Bozeman, Montana. You can kind of see by the map, we cover a wide range of customers, and we have employees kind of spread out throughout kind of the Rocky Mountains. I've been in business for about 26 years, focusing on IT services. So, and I say this in any presentation we do, 10 years ago, 20 years ago, we weren't focusing on cybersecurity, honestly. We've just seen the demand, and that has come to the forefront with our customer base, that we have to answer the bell for our customers and feel like they are protected with the solutions that we're providing them. And we service about 20,000 users. I serve on the Partner Advisory Council with Sophos, and so that's been a great opportunity for me to maybe bring some of these opportunities to you as our customers. We've won some national awards, some with Sophos. We won a Channelnomics Award last year, and we are a Sophos Platinum Partner. And I don't know the exact number anymore. Dan probably has it. I think there's only maybe 13 or 15 of those in the United States. So it's pretty cool that, over here in Bozeman, Montana, we have a platinum partner that's, able to service the rural areas that we live in. So you can kick to the next slide there, Eric. And basically, the final question is, why are we here? We always try to start with why concept. And where we're going with this thing and why we're so excited about MTR is we felt like it was kind of the missing link in total protection to our customers. We've been very passionate about getting people in the right solution and have been preaching this synchronized security message and moving into some advanced, how do we take on this next generation of threats? And our customers, the people on this call, have been great at adopting that with us. And now we're wondering, okay, what do we do next? What are we missing? And it's really that human element. It's okay, AI and all these kind of next gen kind of the pieces of software that we have out there doing their thing is great. When something happens that needs somebody to look at it, do you have the expertise to dive in and remediate? And you need to answer that, and then I need to answer that as a partner to say, can I do that? And right now for us, I don't feel confident that we can do the remediation that we think our customers may need without a service like this. And so basically that's why we're here. We want to take the next step for the people that are saying, what else do I need to do? This is the next level for us. So in saying all that, I'll kick it over to Eric and Matt, and we'll get going.
All right. Well, thank you so much, Brandon, and to the entire Pine Cove team, not only for being, one of our best partners and working alongside us every step of the way, but inviting Matt and I to join this. And thank you to everyone who's joining and listening here today. As Brandon said, please do make liberal use of the questions box. We're happy to answer a lot of questions. As we know, services like this are relatively new to the marketplace. Vendors have not been very kind to buyers. They've made it very difficult to understand what services like this do. There's a lot of confusion out there. So hopefully, our goal today is to help clear that up. And so we're going to be talking about Sophos Managed Threat Response, otherwise called Sophos MTR. And this is Sophos's first offering of services. So we've historically been a product company, as Brandon was mentioning, and now we have the ability to layer a services element on top of that. So providing the tools, the people, the process, all the expertise in order to get the maximum value out of those investments that you've made, and to provide that 24/7 coverage that can be difficult for many organizations to staff internally. So that's what we're going to be walking through today. I'm going to be talking a little bit about the solution and kind of where it comes from and some of the why. Matt's going to show a little bit more of the how, get into the more technical elements of this. So over the course of the next 50 minutes, that's what we'll be working through. So we have this marketing tagline that we like quite a bit here at Sophos: cybersecurity evolved. And marketing stuff aside, why is this the language that we went with? I mean, it's really in response to the fact that attackers are constantly evolving. And so I wanted to start there with just some of the things that we're seeing in the threat landscape, as we know that tools are constantly getting better, and we're able to leverage things like machine learning, like artificial intelligence, to make our tools smarter, to have them do more, to have them automate more of these processes that used to have to be handled by humans. So attackers are having to evolve as well, and they're going to change their tactics, and they're going to get increasingly more involved in terms of managing some of these attacks themselves, and not being able to automate attacks as much as they used to. And so that's kind of what I wanted to cover here initially. So what are we seeing in the threat landscape? One of the ones that we're seeing, one of the types of threats that we're seeing are these living off the land attacks. These are the types of attacks where attackers leveraging legitimate processes, legitimate tools, things that administrators use to make their jobs easier. They use these types of tools frequently, but now attackers come in, they take advantage of these tools, and it allows them to fly under the radar. So things like running PowerShell or PS exec, again, these are legitimate functions, but if an attacker is able to take advantage of these to basically manipulate these types of tools, it's difficult for machines or tools to be able to detect this type of activity, because it's not inherently malicious. And so a tool is not going to be able to convict on or take action on that type of activity, because it could be shutting down a legitimate process, and we don't want to interrupt business operations by shutting down something that's supposed to be happening. So how do you discern the difference between a malicious use of these tools and a regular use, an accepted use of these tools? That's what attackers are hoping that no one has eyes on. So that's one of their favorite ways of executing attacks right now. Another thing that we're seeing is automated compromise followed by human-led farming. And so what this is, there's certain types of attacks now, specifically with certain strains of ransomware, where the beginning of the attack is taking advantage of automation to first gain a foothold within the organization. So they're going to automate a certain process that's going to give them an opening, get them access into an organization. Once in, though, this is where a human attacker is going to take over. We see this with strains like Ryuk ransomware, where that's how that process works. And once the foothold's been gained and attackers now in your environment, their whole purpose is to evade detection. So they're going to start shutting off, certain alerting functions that might raise the attention of an IT or a security professional. They're going to start tampering with those things, shutting them off so that they, again, can stay undetected for a longer period of time. And that leads to the next one that we see is compromising backups to encourage ransom payment. So as part of ransomware attacks, one of the things that has been one of the best defenses is just having good up-to-date backups, so that if your data is encrypted by an attacker, you don't have to pay the ransom. You can just restore everything from backup. Everything's fine. Well, again, now that we have attackers that are flying under the radar, evading detection, one of the first things that they're going to do, in addition to tampering with alert technology, is they're going to find those backups and they're going to delete them, so that when they do encrypt your files, you have no backup anymore. And this is something that we're seeing time and time again with these more sophisticated ransomware attacks that are increasingly targeted and increasingly used, led by human attackers. And then the last one, and one of the more alarming, is the exploitation of third-party vendors in the supply chain. So we see this a lot where organizations, maybe they've done a lot to protect themselves. They have all the appropriate security controls in place to protect their environment, their network, their endpoints, but increasingly organizations have to make their data available to third parties. So these third parties can be lots of ways. If we look back at the Target breach, for example, it was their HVAC technology provider that was initially compromised, and that gave them a way of getting in to execute that particular attack. So you can do everything right to have your foundation set and your defenses fortified, but a partner who has access to your data could have something that some vulnerability that's exploited by an attacker, and it can result in a breach of your own data. So how do we manage all of these things? And this is kind of, again, where we're seeing attackers, and the commonality among all these different types of threats is that they're increasingly human, right? Which is kind of counterintuitive. Everyone thinks that attackers are getting more automated and they're automating certain processes, but they're also getting more skilled, more targeted, and more human. So how do you combat that? And that was really what the goal of managed detection and response. So this is the industry term. We call our service Sophos Managed Threat Response. The broader industry term is called Managed Detection and Response. Again, very new. This term was coined by the analyst firm Gartner in 2016. And we've seen, just again, a lot of companies who've come into this space, making it, again, very difficult for buyers to understand what it is that they're getting. And what this was in response to was, you had your traditional managed security service providers, your MSSPs, that were focused more on security technology management, threat monitoring, compliance monitoring, and these types of functions that are absolutely essential to maintain your IT operations. But as attackers got more sophisticated, as they got, again, more human, there started to be this need to have a group of people who were able to do a little bit more in terms of actually neutralizing those threats, taking action against those threats, responding to them, managing the technology, bringing all of these pieces together. So having it be much more proactive in protecting organizations and protecting sensitive data. In one of the recent reports, Gartner had this quote, which I really think puts a fine point on the situation here. So what Gartner found is that the most successful SOCs, security operations centers, so their clients who were doing security, the most successful ones were putting a premium on people, not technology. So it was people and process that were overshadowing technology as to whether or not those security operations centers were succeeding or failing. And this is one of the things that we've seen over the past several years. As there have been advances in security technology, a lot of organizations, especially those in the mid-market, have placed investments in those tools. But then once they have them, they didn't really count on the fact that we're still going to need to have some people who are managing those if we're going to get the most value from those tools. But meantime, we've got this massive shortage of security talent. So we would see these organizations that would get stuck in this infinity loop of, I'm going to purchase this point solution tool, and then I'm going to realize that it's not doing everything that I hoped it would. So I'm going to try and find talent to use that tool, but I can't find the talent. So then I invest in another tool, and it just kind of repeats itself, and it's insanity. So this is why services like this exist, to give organizations the ability to have an elite modern security operations center at their back, but not have to build it in-house, to be able to have a team on the outside that is doing this proactive monitoring, detection, and response for them. So that was kind of the promise of managed detection and response, and that's kind of what we do here. So you might wonder, though, what's the goal of all this? Like, why would I invest in a service like this? Where does this fit in my overall security strategy? And so we have a very simple view of this. Your security program objective for most organizations, probably some of you on this call would hopefully agree with this. It's to detect attacks on sensitive data assets and neutralize incidents before they become a breach. right? That seems pretty obvious, so much so that we could probably have this written in crayon. It seems that basic. We need to be able to detect attacks on our data and prevent the breach. And what are the components of that? Well, number one, we need to be able to prevent known attacks and methods wherever data resides. So those attacks that we know about, we know how to respond to, those are the ones that are easier to automate, and that's why we have tools to be able to do that, some of that stuff. The next one is we need to be able to detect new attacks and methods. So what about the things that tools don't know about yet? Again, as attackers are evolving, they're going to be looking for ways to evade detection from the tools that are out there. They know what tools are out there. They're going to be trying to find ways to circumvent them. So you need to be able to have ways of detecting those new attacks, those new tactics, procedures, anything that attackers are doing. And the last part is you need to be able to neutralize those threats quickly before they result in a breach. So again, does every organization have the internal resources, the team of people who's going to be able to do that? Very few do. Most of those organizations that do are going to be your larger enterprises that can afford to, recruit, retain that talent, to make investments in the tools, to tie all that stuff together with process, and to be able to manage it effectively over time. So very difficult for many organizations to do. So that's what we're trying to achieve here, is make sure that we're ticking every one of these boxes. And that's where our solution is designed around. So again, it's expert-led threat response. So there's some components to that, and Matt's going to go into much deeper detail on this, but it starts with 24/7 human-led threat hunting. So everything that our team is doing, because again, this is a service, not a tool, it is going to be humans that are doing stuff to protect your environment. And so the goal of threat hunting is to be able to identify those new patterns of attack behavior, to find the things that are evading detection from tools, to find those new threats, the things that we don't know about yet, the things that are going to happen tomorrow and the next day and the next day. That's the goal of threat hunting, and that's where things start. The other part of this is we're not just investigating suspicious we're not just investigating things that are detected by tools. We're also investigating suspicious activities. And this is where we have this concept of a gap of again, how do you tell the difference between something that is malicious or benign? And if a tool can't take an action on that, that's where it's going to require human intervention and a human investigation to determine what activity we're seeing and if it is in fact something that should be perceived as a threat. And then the last part, and probably the most important piece that we wanted to build into our service, is that we're not stopping at notification. So the vast majority of managed detection and response providers, they do threat monitoring and then notification. So they will look out for bad stuff, and if they see something that they think is bad, they will send it to the customer and say, we saw this thing, here's a list of things you can do to hopefully make that bad thing go away. We had one of our colleagues described it as similar to if you hired someone to come clean your house and all they did was give you a list of things that are dirty, right? So if you're going to be investing in a service, the vast majority of organizations want a team that can take action on their behalf. They want to maintain control, they want to maintain visibility, they want to know what's going on, but they want someone else who's doing the heavy lifting, who's doing the work. And so that's the value of the service that we're providing and how we design this. So I was talking before about the different ways that attacks kind of function, and again trying to slot this solution into where does this fit alongside tools and process. So we have this concept of 3 scenarios that we like to talk through, and this is just kind of a broad overview of the different threat scenarios that come into play. So scenario number 1. So we've got 2 boxes here. We've got a detection. We saw something in a response. What did we do about it? So in the detection scenario, we've got in this scenario 1 is a tool is going to detect an attacker's suspicious behavior. Now the response in this particular case is the tool has seen this before. It knows that this attack or behavior is something that is inherently malicious, and it knows what action it should take. So it can automate a response. This is what tools are really good at. This is what our Intercept X tool is particularly good at, is finding those known threats and being able to automate an action so that it does not require human intervention. We love that because it means that our team could be focusing on stuff that matters, the stuff that requires human intervention. We don't want to be doing repetitive tasks that are better handled by a machine. So that's scenario 1. Scenario two is a tool detects an attacker's suspicious behavior, but in this case, it doesn't know enough about that attacker behavior to automate a response for various reasons. Again, it can be one of those adversarial detections where it's a behavior that we're seeing. It's someone who's using a legitimate process, but we can't automate a block because we don't know if that process is malicious or not. So the tool doesn't know how to take action. So this is where an analyst, a human analyst, is going to have to conduct an investigation where they're going to be pulling all this information together to find out what is the intent of this activity. Matt's going to go into more detail on what that investigative framework looks like. Once that analyst has determined what is happening here, then they need to figure out, how do we respond to this? What actions are we going to take to neutralize this threat? And then lastly, we're going to take the outcome of that investigation, the outcome of that response, and we're going to feed that back into our tools so that our tools get smarter over time. Because that's the point of machine learning. Machines are only as good as what we teach them. So every time that our human team is doing things, it's having a downstream effect of making our machines, our tools, that much better down the line so that it can automate those things in the future. So that's scenario 2. So scenario 3, the tool doesn't detect anything. And because it doesn't detect anything, obviously it can't take any type of action. So this is where a human analyst who's conducting a threat hunt, looking for new indicators of compromise, or an IOC, because we love our acronyms in security. This is where an analyst is going to be looking for those patterns of behavior, those types of activities that don't cross a certain threshold to automatically generate a detection that's going to launch an investigation. This is where an analyst is going to be looking for some of the clues that could be indicative of attacker behavior and determine whether or not, again, those patterns of behavior are malicious or benign. And then again, it's going to result in conducting that investigation to confirm whether or not that activity is good or bad, and then deciding what actions need to be taken at that point. And again, ends with the point of taking the learnings, the outcome of those investigations and what we found, feeding it back into the system so our tools can be better over time. So those are the 3 scenarios. So in scenario 1, again, that's tools, good tools doing their job. In scenario 2, this is where a lot of managed detection and response providers out there will stop at the investigation, and then again, they're sending the customer a list of things that they then have to take care of themselves. And then that next level of kind of maturity is now we're not just responding to the things that we're seeing or that tools are telling us. We're constantly looking around the corner, turning over rocks, trying to figure out what attackers are doing next, looking in those corners where attackers might be trying to evade detection, identifying those things, and then working to neutralize those threats. So hopefully that gives you kind of a broad picture of kind of where this fits in, why you need the tool components, why you need the people components, and how they get merged together to result in an overall better solution. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Matt, because he's going to talk about, how do we do all this stuff?
Yeah, thanks, Eric. So I felt it important to kind of hit up front, what does our team look like? We staff a 24/7 operation to make sure that we have people available around the clock to be able to perform these services for our customers. And we break people up into different specialties of kind of responsibility within our team. So at the highest level, we have our threat analysts. So these are the folks that are taking the telemetry coming off of the tools. They're responding to detections that are coming from InterceptX and our MTR product, and they're performing the investigation following our framework for determining whether or not what the activity we're observing is malicious, benign, or somewhere in between. And then they're working with our customers to kind of get to the bottom and ultimately remediate that. We have our threat hunters. So these are the folks that are looking through all of the data that we collect. Our MTR tool kind of sits alongside the InterceptX product and allows us to collect a lot more rich information that's coming from the endpoints and the estates that we monitor. So we get a lot of good process data. We get a lot of file activity data, just really good intelligence about what's going on those endpoints. And then we can subsequently start analyzing, reviewing, looking through that data for signs of malicious activity or anomalous activity that then we may want to investigate further, that could ultimately be a sign of attack, or maybe it's just something that's acting out of the ordinary, but nevertheless good to look at and good to know. And then finally, we have our incident response team. So if we think of kind of this in a flow diagram, our threat analysts and our threat hunters are kind of on the front lines, looking at data, reviewing information coming off of the technologies that we have, and ultimately going through our process to make a decision. whether or not we need to do something about it. In a lot of cases, response actions that we can take, such as removing a file or killing a process, they're very specific to the alert that we received. However, if we get to the point where we're seeing multiple assets within the environment that are infected, or maybe it's a broader incident, we have a team that's specifically tasked with doing incident response with our customers to help through the process, the framework, making sure heads stay cool through that whole process. And they're the experts that get brought in at that point to work with the customers for remediation, triage, and hopefully recovery at the end. So in our world, process is very, very important. The technology that we use builds a great foundation, but ultimately what our team needs to have a very robust and strong process. And this is then something our customers can leverage by working with us and having kind of a integrated process with us. So I'm not going to go through every box on this flow chart, but the important piece to keep in mind here is that both automated and manual detection. So an automated detection is going to be something that comes off of a technology, a tool. A manual detection is going to be something such as one of our threat hunters generating a case or something to go investigate. We follow the same methods to get to the answers, regardless of how the case gets to us. So we're first going to, orient around the data that we observe. That's going to come through the form of, what metadata is available in the alert. Is the activity that I'm observing, a known activity for an adversary based on some sort of framework? Am I looking at just a single asset, or maybe there's multiple assets in my estate that's exhibiting the same behavior? I'm then going to take that information and perform a little bit of additional analysis on it. So I have a starting point, and now I'm going to go look for additional information. So maybe I get an alert that PowerShell has executed. I'm going to then go look to see what other activity around that PowerShell event may have occurred on that endpoint that would lead me to believe that it's malicious, or maybe, as Eric was saying, since this stuff is somewhat difficult to determine whether we're looking at admin activity or malicious activity, we can go additionally look at that information to make that call. And then finally, we're going to have observables at the outset of this. So observables in our world are data elements that can allow us to answer kind of our leading questions. They're going to be in the form of file activities, IP addresses, domain names, anything that gives us a good indication that there's activity or something that we need to go investigate further. Ultimately, what we're trying to do is we're trying to answer these questions down here in the left-hand box. Our team wants to know, is the activity that we're observing malicious? Was it successful? Because in some cases it's not going to be, because we can observe activity, but it's going to get blocked by tools. And what was the extent? So are we dealing with kind of an isolated incident or an isolated detection where it's impacting a single host in the network, or is this a broad impacting detection that we're seeing activity across multiple different hosts? Ultimately, what we want to do is we want to respond to whatever situation we do run across, and these questions allow our analysts then to build confidence and allows us to kind of measure progress as we're going through it. In some cases, we're going to make it through this process in one loop. It's a cyclical process. Sometimes it takes 3 or 4 times through this framework to pull different pieces of information each time to start getting to the point where we're ready to respond and take action on something. So what exactly is threat hunting in our world? So we believe that threat hunting is human-led investigation of causal or adjacent events. So you can think of a lot of the data that we deal with is in time series. So we're looking for things that occur around each other within that time. or we're reviewing, repeat activity of the same types of things. So what we're trying to do is we're trying to look and ask the data that we have questions to identify patterns, activity of adversaries or malicious activity. So we're looking for new indicators of attack, so things that the tools may not be good at detecting, or maybe there's not a good method of detecting, or new indicators of compromise. So, with our kind of experts at the keyboard, we know kind of what malicious activity looks like. We know how adversaries operate, and now we can start going and looking through that data to see if we can identify any of that information. As Eric said before, this is a really important process for our team, because what it allows us to do is, as we're out there identifying new indicators of attack and compromise, we're able to then kind of push that back into our engineering teams. So maybe we can increase our detection efficacy so we can detect this in the future. And then, other products to where maybe we can get past detection and actually get some prevention capabilities in place, so that threat can't exist going forward. So there's 3 types of threat hunting: automated threat hunting, and this is kind of a misnomer in our industry, in that InterceptX provides very strong automated threat hunting. So these are the EDR products out there are firing detections of anomalous activity, and you're able to then go review it, or the tool can do something about that. Lead-driven threat hunting is similar, but when we have when we're getting those alerts, it's still a human-initiated activity. And that's really a fundamental difference here between kind of automated and lead-driven. We believe that there's human capital that needs to be spent on this, so we put people, and we have humans that have kind of lived and breathed this for a very long time review this information. So lead-driven threat hunt, they're going to start with kind of a detection or something that that looks bad but may not be a high enough severity to generate a case for our team to work. And they're going to go review that, see if it potentially is bad, and then we can again sort out whether or not that should have escalated in priority on our side based on the results of that investigation. And finally, leadless threat hunting, and this is where it's more of an exercise more of kind of understanding the data that you do have and are collecting, and understanding new tactics and techniques of adversaries to start going and looking for more interesting and obfuscated information through the data that we do collect. So whereas a lead-driven threat hunt, you're looking for kind of activity that's there. A leadless threat hunt, you're going and looking for using a lot of different data to start putting a picture together of what might actually be happening. And oftentimes, a lot of the, for leadless threat hunts, they do come up empty-handed. It's not like every time we're finding some new indicators of compromise or indicator of attack, but that's fine, because what the absence of those activities are also a good indication that there's nothing going on in that environment. So it's kind of a false negative in our world.
So I want to jump in real quick on the topic of threat hunting, because this is, in our realm, this is probably one of the terms that is kind of the buzziest of buzzwords that's out there. So lots of folks are saying that they do threat hunting. What we've found is that the vast majority of them are doing more of that automated approach, where they're taking advantage of tools. Whereas on the other side, we've got we're doing it at a much higher level of efficacy involving people. So, it's not quite the same as, a threat hunt's a threat hunt is a threat hunt. There's multiple different forms, and there's some that are going to be much more reliant on technology, and some that are going to be less reliant on technology. So for the next part, we wanted to be able to jump over to a different screen here. So bear with us while we bring this up here in a moment.
If there's any questions so far from the audience, I'm happy to kind of walk through or address any of those as we pull up kind of the next slides.
Just have one pop in here. Let me. So this question says, do you see yourself competing against folks like Arctic Wolf and CI Security? Hold on. Can't see the rest of it here. Maybe I'll just let you start there while I try to get the rest of that question.
Yeah, they definitely do fall kind of fall in line on the competitor matrix. We're both kind of in the MDR market. There is a pretty big key differentiator between the likes of Arctic Wolf versus what other vendors are doing, such as us. And it starts getting into the difference between kind of network-based detections versus host-based detections, where currently in our model, we're very focused on the endpoint because we have a lot of good telemetry there, and can add in some of that network telemetry over time as we integrate with our XG products. Whereas some of those other vendors are very focused on network telemetry. And the big difference there is response. When you're sitting on the endpoint and you kind of have access then to kind of what's going on there, you're able to take very targeted actions on that endpoint to terminate a process, delete a file, and really neutralize what's going on there. On the network, you do get limited and kind of shoehorned into being able to initiate maybe only network blocks on the firewall. So you're not able to really get to the bottom of the issue, and you end up having to then work with third party or internal support or IT to really get and neutralize the threat that you observe.
Awesome. And maybe one more question here, and thanks for the question inputs. These are great. The next question is, did I hear correctly that there's an MTR agent that would sit next to Intercept X?
Yeah, that's a really good question. So yes, when the MTR solution is kind of separate from the Intercept X solution, so it's a lightweight agent that sits alongside Intercept X. We use a lot of the same data that Intercept X does, but we also have access to a lot more rich information coming off of our specific software. So the screenshots that we have up on the slide deck now are there's a purpose-built portal for our team to operate in, so it's going to look a little bit different to everybody, and not necessarily information that's going to be available in Central. Over time, a lot of it will be migrated in there, but our team's kind of hyper-focused on being able to execute on this information that we're collecting quickly.
Awesome, thanks.
I guess on the topic of, how is this different than Intercept X? Because that's a really good question. So our technology allows us kind of two methods for data collection. There's scheduled queries, which these are things that execute periodically on the endpoint that are collecting information, processes, files, registry values, network connections, just a lot of good data about what's going on that endpoint. And then there's the additional advantage there that allows us to use this ability called live query. So whereas the data within a scheduled, these scheduled queries goes into our backend, we can, search that very rapidly. there's oftentimes, especially when we're dealing with potentially incident response or threat hunting, where maybe there's some other information on that endpoint that we want to get access to. A live query then allows us to go do that, and we can get information from that server. So it gives us kind of a live snapshot based on what our search parameters are of that endpoint. So primary use cases, scheduled queries, we use those a lot for when we receive detections, generic searching and performing investigations, and then live queries for threat hunting, IR, and also investigations, as there's usually a lot of good data that we can pull. So I wanted to provide a little bit of behind the scenes of kind of what we see on the MTR platform. So our team, while we do operate out of a kind of tailor-made tool for us to be able to work efficiently, we do also from time to time go into Customer Central accounts, review policies through kind of health check process, review threat cases and things that are ongoing in there. We share a lot of the same data as what's coming off of InterceptX, but it's still a valuable time spent for us to go in there and just kind of see the health and the state of what's going on in our Customer Central environments. So when we get a threat detection or an alert on our side, we get a lot of granular information, so we can see kind of what the host was, any networking information around it. We get some intelligence about the actual command that was executed, and we know kind of why this activity was brought to our attention in the first place. So in this case, we're looking at PowerShell encoding, which is a very common vector for adversaries to use these days to mask what they're doing. And oftentimes there's kind of malicious commands within that encoding that then we can kind of pivot on and really uncover what they're doing. So all of this information, when we get a detection, gets brought right to the forefront of what our analysts are working on, and we can then go see from here, pivot through the data that we have and start looking around about surrounding activity from this specific detection. Additionally, kind of back in line with the threat hunting aspect, it's not all the time where one event is going to be indicative that there's kind of adversaries or there's an attack going on. A lot of the times I see one activity and then I see some additional activity, and then maybe it kind of culminates with a really bad command being executed. So what we want to try to do is identify that activity way further back, kind of in the attack life cycle. We use the MITRE attack matrix to kind of map these things out for our analysts. But what we want to try to do is observe this activity, when somebody's just doing reconnaissance or they're doing some probing within the environment based on commands they're running. We want to identify the activity there before they're actually able to get to the point of running either the malware or the backdoor on those networks. So when we go in and look at the data, we have, we pull this stuff up and we can see a lot of this activity. So in the screenshot, we can see, alerts from Sophos, Locky. Nobody wants to see Locky. Nobody wants ransomware. But then we can also see kind of a succession of, okay, they're doing some reconnaissance commands on that asset, looking at, who's logged in, what's my networking info, and then finally getting to the point where they're executing commands, SC, which allows you to gather configuration information, and ultimately trying to launch some PowerShell commands. So on the MTR side, all this data is there then available to our analysts. And as Eric had said earlier, operating more so in that gray area, because as a preventative tool, you wouldn't want to necessarily block all these things as it would severely impact your ability to work on that machine. Users would be yelling. So our kind of task there was to get eyes on it, so then we can identify that activity and prevent it sooner before they're able to get to taking actions on their objectives. I think we covered that. So I wanted to go into a little bit more detail about some of the data that we do use for performing threat hunting, and this is kind of a good follow along for everybody on the call, as there's probably a lot of this data that you already have collected or maybe available in your own environment. It may not be centralized to the point where it's easily accessible, but you can still kind of go out and start looking at this data and getting an idea of what's going on. So for endpoint data, the information that we like to look at: process execution, so knowing when things ran, registry data, and file artifacts. So these are all very common things for adversaries to use. So we wanted to make sure we have very good visibility into these things happening on the network or on an endpoint that we have protection on. Network data, and this can come in many different forms. So this can come from firewall appliances or even off of the endpoint. You can still get firewall logs and DNS logs and know kind of what's happening on that endpoint. Some of this will come from kind of edge devices if you're looking for IDS data, but it's still an additional and very good source to review in aggregate to be able to identify abnormal things, abnormal devices reaching out to maybe command and control domains, or just doing some brief aggregations on the data to see, okay, maybe I've had five endpoints reach out to this one suspect domain, and I'm going to go then now investigate that because I can see that. And finally, security data. So security alerts, things coming off of other systems that are saying bad things are going on. Those are great starting points for kind of performing an investigation, continuing to review and kind of digging in. And then threat intelligence. So we have a global labs department here that's doing a lot of reverse engineering, malware analysis, and has a lot of good global reputation intelligence about domains, files, and the such. So when we're seeing something in an environment, we're able to then query and look for that information to see if what we're observing has been observed before, is it new, and does it allow us to kind of speed up our investigation if we have that information from them. So I wanted to end talking about the threat hunting piece with an example. So we've been working with a number of customers for a while now. And this is a pretty interesting example of where a leadless threat hunt can, kind of result in a good outcome. The interesting bit about this story, though, is we didn't uncover malicious activity. There wasn't an attacker or an adversary in this network, but through kind of the use of our threat hunting methods and our framework, we were able to uncover this problem for this particular customer. So periodically, our team comes up with different threat hunts of the week, or broad hypothesis that we want to go then look through the data. So when we were looking at this one, we were looking for base64 encoding as a common technique for fileless malware, persistence, and many other things in the attacker's world. So what we do then, we take that kind of hypothesis and then go start looking through all the data that we collect to see if we can observe any activity of this. Just so happens in this specific environment, we were observing some of that activity, and what we were observing was every host in this customer's environment was running a shell script, so something running on the command line that was then passing passwords and usernames in plain text out to a remote IP that they didn't own. So it was going out over the internet. At least that's what it appeared to be to us based on what we were seeing on the endpoint. So we kind of packaged up our findings based on the research that we did, sent it over to the customer, and it ended up being that shell file was a third-party application. So they had a vendor that they were using that was doing analytics about these user accounts on the systems, and that shell script was kind of reading in the session information from the users and then sending it back up to the analysis server of that third party. So what we were able to do through kind of our threat hunting was identify that this activity was going on in the first place, because it wouldn't have been identifiable through a normal mechanism of prevention, and then work with the customer who can then work with their vendor to decrease the risk that this may pose in that organization. It was a healthcare organization, so obviously clear text anything is never a good thing. So we were able to kind of identify this and address this with the customer and the vendor to make sure that that kind of script going forward was handling the sensitive credentials and passwords on those endpoints in a more sane manner, and handling it correctly, I guess. And with that, I think we have about 9 minutes left for questions and comments, if anybody has them.
Yeah, I got a couple more that came in. I'll relay them here. So, is there a dedicated analyst team you work with when using this service?
That's a great question. We're staffed 24/7, so there isn't a dedicated team per customer. However, there are some service tiers that we offer. In our advanced tier, we do offer kind of a dedicated incident response lead. So in the event that there is an incident, you can call in and you'll get attached to an incident response person on our side. We operate 3 shifts, so we do handovers at each kind of shift transition. But for the duration of that particular incident or event, you will know who you're going to be working with. You'll have a contact. You will have a number, and that's going to be your point of contact for the period of time that we're kind of working through that together. So we don't assign analysts to customers, but in the event that there are incidents, we do pay closer attention there to making sure that we have individuals assigned to specific incidents.
Okay. And then I'm going to kind of morph this question because I think maybe some of it got answered. But as far as information, me being the client, what do I see as far as actively what you're looking at? Do I get visibility into that? Is there reporting? What do I have as the representative of my environment? What do I see for data?
Yeah, so a lot of the data that we collect through MTR is kind of visible to our analysts. We are working diligently on trying to get some of that into Central, so customers have access to that as well. But from a customer experience perspective, what you can expect to receive is one, escalations and or notifications from our analysts if something is happening, has happened, depending on the different response mode that was selected. So you'll receive communication with a breakout of what we observed. Here's all the activity, very detailed recommendations on what we think you should be doing next. We have response modes, and if we're an authorized and we're taking action, a detailed breakdown of what we actually did to resolve that threat. Additionally, there's monthly reporting from our team. So every 30 days, we issue out these activity reports. We call them MTR activity reports, which we tried to put together, in a way that details a lot of the critical information that customers would want to see. It's not super detailed in that it doesn't allow you to go into every single case and see what happened, but it's an overview of kind of the environment. So we wanted to make sure customers knew, based on what we were seeing, how we thought the protections were in that environment. A big part of us being able to work effectively is coverage, so highlighting unprotected nodes that we're able to identify, detection data, and then ultimately, here's the number of cases that our team worked for you during the course of this 30 days. This is how many of those were escalated over to you, and then ultimately, hopefully, it's always a 0, but the number of incidents that we worked together based on the activity that we were seeing.
I wanted to just touch on it because Matt brought up response modes, and so this is something that we built into our service that is completely unique to this offering. No one else does anything like this. But the purpose was to make sure that we were giving our customers a lot of flexibility and control around how they wanted to work with us. We didn't want to dictate and tell customers, here's how to work with Sophos MTR. We want to say, you have some internal resources. You want to be able to figure out how to use those most effectively. So we're going to give you some different options. And so we've got 3 different response modes that customers can choose from. Notify is, we just want another set of eyes out there that's keeping an eye on our endpoints and letting us know what you're seeing, and then providing us with recommendations that we can take on our own. So that's what the vast majority, as I mentioned before, that's what the vast majority of MDR providers do. That's their only setting, is we're going to keep a lookout and then notify you. We have that as one of the options, and this is for organizations that are either just getting started, and that's where they want to kind of begin the relationship with our team, or it's for those that have internal resources that they want to keep managing threats internally, and they just want that, again, extra set of eyes. On the total opposite end of the spectrum, we have authorized, which is you're going to give our team the keys to the car. We're going to work with you to identify and kind of predetermine what actions you want us to take, what actions you're okay with us taking, hence authorize. But then we're going to handle all containment and neutralization actions on behalf of the customer. So we're going to do all that heavy lifting, and then we're going to provide them information around what actions we took, what activity we saw, provide additional context around how to prevent something like this from happening again. And then splitting the difference between those is collaborate. So this is where an organization might want to do kind of a mix of both, where maybe they want their internal team focused on some things and they want our team focused on others. Just very kind of bi-directional communication to make sure that we're all working together. So again, it's 3 response modes, and these are, we don't charge more for these, and it doesn't matter which of our service tiers you enter into. This is just kind of a default choice that customers get to make to figure out how they want to work with us. So I just wanted to point that out as something that is quite unique to this offering.
Yeah, and I might just add something to that, Brandon, here. This is huge for me because we have a diverse subset of customers. We have people that maybe have a small team that could maybe do some of these things. Cool. Like, just notify me and let us go do the work. That's awesome. But I'd say we have a lot more customers that just say, I understand, I need this. I don't want to worry about it. Like, I just want, you just let me know all the good fight you're fighting for me. Give me a report that I can take to my key stakeholders, and I'm good. And so the ability to, with the same solution, be able to let me pick my own path as the customer, I think is awesome, because if you put this all into one box, there's going to be people who either want more stuff to do or more responsibility or less, and you're never going to find the perfect fit. And what you've done here is huge, in my opinion. So it's a great slide.
Yeah, thank you. And you don't get locked into a response mode either. So as things change, as your needs change, if you do decide to hire someone 2-3 years from now, then you can change your response mode. And again, that's regardless of the service tier that you have. So we do have a lot of customers who will start at Notify. That's just kind of, they want to take things slow, get to know the team. And then before long, they're at Authorize. We have certain customers that join and they're immediately, we want Authorize because we got this service because we wanted the easy button. We wanted someone taking care of all this on our behalf. So yeah, you can change it over time as your needs change. We wanted to make sure that we were accommodating that need.
Okay, I'm going to ask one quick question, then we can wrap up. So one last one I got here was, is there any potentially sensitive data that would leave our environment as part of the incident response?
Depends on, I guess, what different organizations consider sensitive data. So I can describe a little bit about what we do collect. So we collect, my short answer would be no, but it just depends based on how you define it. So we collect IP addresses, of course, and user accounts and names. We're not actually collecting contents and or the actual information within a file. So we're not pulling that information. A lot of what we have is just metadata around the activities that are happening on the endpoint. So we would know a file path, the file name, maybe a hash of a file, but we're not gathering the actual contents of said files.
Okay, great. Well, hey, it's right at the top of the hour here. I think I'm going to wrap up here. First off, I really appreciate the engagement from the audience. The questions were excellent. Thank you to Eric and Matt. Can't thank you enough for taking the time to specifically work with us on this. Awesome presentation. And, as a follow-up, if you want to see more of a customized demo of this, or want to hear more, or just, want to understand maybe the different service levels, whatever that is, reach out to us. Here at Pineco, we can do any and all of those things for you. And again, we'll be sending out the recording for this. Please follow up if there's any questions, and thanks again for your time.
Yes, thank you so much for having us. We really appreciate it.
Thanks.